Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Until 6, where we talk about all things related to Five Nights at Freddy's. Today we're going to be talking about all the times the FNAF franchise has tried to end, because over the course of about the 12 games that exist in the franchise, it has actually tried to end multiple times, and the first time was actually supposed to be the last time. So let's begin. Five Nights at Freddy's was released on August the 8th, 2014 for Windows, and was first released on the website Desora, later then released on Steam and a variety of other websites. Now, this was meant to be Scott Cawthon's last game, as he had been a game developer for many, many years, since the 1990s, and after years of lack of success, he decided this to be his last game. He made this game specifically out of spite, as his previous game, Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., had been bashed by critics, and the characters had been described as creepy and as looking like animatronics. And so he had taken these criticisms of his characters looking like animatronics and creepy, and decided to purposely make a game about animatronics that were creepy. And that's how he developed Five Nights at Freddy's. Like I said, this is meant to be his last ever game, henceforth the end of the franchise. There was never plans for a second, third, or whatever game. But due to its massive success, he decided to continue on with the second game. And then came the third game. The third game was meant to be the last game, as at the time, that was meant to be the end of the story. He didn't have more plot. He thought a trilogy was a nice, neat way to wrap everything all up, you know. Most stories are in trilogies. It's either a stand-up or a trilogy. That's the most common way to format things, really. So it only made sense to put it into a trilogy, and he didn't think that there was any more story, really, after it. Now, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was released for Windows on March 2nd, 2015 on Steam, later ported to mobile, Android, and a variety of other things, just like the first game. And in the game, now, the story for this, with the third game, was a very simple story. And with the first game, there were some things that were a little confusing, but by the third game, we had a clear, concise story, that could easily be neatly wrapped up. By the original trilogy, the story went as follows. In the 1970s, early 1980s, a place known as Fredbear's Family Diner opened up, and it featured Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, two animatronics which were not regular robots. They dealt with both animatronics and suits using what was known as spring-lock technology. A hand crank can turn it from a robot into a wearable suit. But if it were to fail and break, then the robotic parts would slide back into place, impaling the wearer and usually killing them. Now, a person of unknown name ended up killing a child outside of Fredbear's Family Diner. This child went on to possess the puppet. After this terrible incident, the restaurant shut down due to bad PR, and it was reopened as a much larger restaurant with more characters known as Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, featuring Freddy the Bear, Chicky the Chicken, Bonnie the Bunny, and Foxy the Pirate Fox. And these Springlock characters were retired, as there was an incident with them where two of the suits broke down and had Springlock failures, most likely killing the wearers, as from what we know about them, they seem to be extremely fatal. These are retired as into the safe room. This is the room that the wearers then put on their costumes and when they're meant to bleed out. Now, eventually, the man from beforehand came back to the restaurant and donned one of these suits and used the suits to lure away 5 children. He killed them inside of the safe room and stuffed their bodies with animatronics. The child murdered outside of Fredbear's, who had possessed the puppet, brought the children back to life, allowing them to possess the animatronics and go out for revenge. In the following days and weeks, the animatronics began to have blood and mucus pour out of their eyes and mouths and have erotic stench come from them. This caused the restaurant to be shut down, and eventually reopened in 1987. It was only open for a couple of weeks, as the man who had killed by this point 6 children returned and killed another group of children. These went on to possess the new and improved toy animatronics made out of sleek plastic and connected to a criminal database, which allowed them to detect a predator from a mile away. A man known as Jeremy Fisher, now he had actually worked at the night shift there, before being transferred to the day shift. Now, a man named Jeremy Fitzgerald worked a week there, while the place became under investigation due to the new murders there. He eventually was switched to the day shift for one final party as the place was about to shut down. Tragically, he most likely was the one victim of the Bite of 87, where an animatronic bit out the frontal lobe of a person. We don't know who did it, but it was most likely Jeremy Fitzgerald. Another man named Fritz Smith worked only one night there before it was shut down. The place reopened under smaller circumstances with the old animatronic that retrofitted to look better. A man only known as the Phone Guy worked as the night guard there for some time before planning to quit. He recorded phone calls for the new guy during his final week, but was killed on the fourth night. The following week, a man known as Mike Schmidt worked a whole 7 days there as the night guard, but was fired after tampering with the animatronics. The place shut down at the year's end as nobody wanted to go there anymore due to the many murders that had taken place there. 30 years later, the place reopened. The legend and stories surrounding the restaurant causing the spur for Fazbear's Frights. Now, after the restaurant had shut down, the purple guy, the killer of the children, broke into the restaurant and destroyed the animatronics. Their spirits chased him into the safe room, the room where he had killed them. Instead of scaring them, he went back into the spring-locked suit where he had lured them away. But the spring locks broke, most likely due to the leaky roof, as they were known to be very breakable around water. The spring locks went off, and he was crushed and killed inside of it, where he went on to possess it and become Springtrap. 30 years later, he was found and brought into the attraction. An unknown man worked there for several nights before the place, due to faulty wiring, burnt to the ground. The children finally were able to pass on and go to heaven, while Springtrap survived, going off into the night, never to be seen again. But then there was a fourth game, Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was advertised as the final chapter. Scott made this game because people criticized the jump scares in the game. The jump scare of Springtrap wasn't particularly scary, and people criticized the game for this. So he decided to make a whole new game just because people didn't like the jump scares, and made these as purposely scary as humanly possible. This was advertised, like I said, as the final chapter, and it was released on July 23rd, 2015 on Steam for Windows, ahead of schedule. Now, this game changed up the lore and made things far, far, far more confusing, as evidence from it pointed to the idea that everything was a dream inside the mind of a child who had their head crushed at Fredbear's family's diner and was dying in the hospital. Wow. It was this game specifically that created the dream theory that everything, and there was very good evidence that this was meant to be true. This really was meant to be the story, and this was all just a dream. And there's even heavy evidence that this was meant to be the Bite of 87, not at this Fredbear's family diner. Of course, this was later retconned later on, and we know now that dream theory was not true, but there's heavy evidence that that may have been actually was meant to be what it was, and there's very clear evidence that this place was meant to be where the Bite of 87 took place. We only came up with the Bite of 83 because on TV, in one of the post-night minigames, you could see 1983 appear, giving credence to the idea this was not in fact 1987, but 1983. But we never got a confirmed year, actually. We only had the 1983 number on TV to go off of. But in this game, you play the child who is terrorized by night terrors of the animatronics in horrific, nightmarish forms. So every time you get into your bedroom, you have to keep them out. During the daytime, you are tormented by your older brother, who consistently bullies you, using your fear of the animatronics to scare you. On your birthday, him and his hooligan friends take you and put you inside the mouth of Fredbear. Your head is crushed by Fredbear, and in the following night, you face off against Fredbear, and eventually Nightmare Fredbear, before you finally pass on. This whole time, you had a psychic talking Fredbear plush, who insisted that you remembered what you had seen, that you needed to get out of there because you needed to remember what you saw, and you couldn't be there because it was at Fredbear because it was dangerous. There was a lot of loose ends you left behind with this fourth game, and that would have been very satisfactory because there's a lot of loose ends left with this game, and they kind of took everything on its head, made everything seemingly worse. Now, 2 years down the line was Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, FNAF 6. It was released on Steam for Windows on December the 4th, 2017, and it was actually available for free on certain sites. Now, this was meant to be the last game, the true ending. In this one, the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria you work at is fake. It was meant to be a trap to lure back in all of the remaining animatronics and all the remaining people. You as Michael Afton, Henry Emily, William Afton's business partner, and all the other animatronics lured to the one place where the horrors can finally end. The place is set ablaze by Henry Emily, and the place burned down to the ground, killing everyone in it. Fazbear and a payment shuts down, and this is meant to be the end of the story. But then it came out to UCN, Ultimate Custom Night. Now initially, Ultimate Custom Night was just meant to be this sort of fun sort of spin-off thing, nice fun way to end things off. But then we looked into it, and there was very clearly more lore. There was story into this, and we figured out this was William Afton's Purgatory. This is what happened to him after the events of the Pizzeria Simulator. Everyone is dead and has gone off to heaven except for William due to his actions. He's killed like 11 people. What do you expect? But then, and we thought this was the end, really. He was permanently trapped in purgatory where everybody else went off to heaven. But then more things came out. How Wanted, and there was Christopher Dreadbear, and then there was Security Breach, and then there was Security Breach Ruin, and there was Help Wanted 2, and then there was The Secret of the Mimic, and it was kind of going, and it still hasn't reached an end. There was a nice ending here, but it just kept going and going and going, and we're not even dealing with anybody from the old time period anymore. Everybody's dead and gone. Or it's a new story, but everybody's dead and gone. Yeah. What a frick. Anyways, I'll see y'all around sometime soon. So, bye. Have a nice time.